I want to talk as well about Roe versus Wade because we're waiting right now for really any day now for the Supreme Court to rule on Roe v. Wade. They were expected to rule. They're expected to rule sometime between yesterday and tomorrow. So maybe today, maybe tomorrow we'll get a ruling. We'll see. Now on this though, basically the government is anticipating a lot of violence. They're anticipating at the very least riots. And the FBI is saying that violence will not be tolerated as this ruling comes out. But as they're saying that, the Supreme Court protest organizations are saying they will not rule out the use of violence. And look, keep in mind, okay, you just had, in I believe Idaho, you had this group Patriot Front go to an abortion rally. Antifa was there. Patriot Front was there. Patriot Front are those guys who dress in khakis and blue shirts, and they're kind of like the right wing Antifa. A lot of people on the conservative side tend to think they're federal agents because they look like feds, and I personally don't know anybody who supports them. but the interesting thing was this: they were all arrested. They showed up at the protest. They were all arrested. Antifa not only was not arrested, but they even filmed the arrest of the other side. Now, what did they arrest them on? They arrested them on charges of intent to riot. Now, you have other groups right now making it clear they have the intent to riot, and even saying publicly they're not going to rule out even using violence. So not only intent to riot, but possible intent to use violence. They're saying they're not going to write off that they might do that. These are the groups as well that are openly violating the laws on protesting in front of the homes of Supreme Court justices. This is different. This is an important note because you've had some Democrats say, well, people have protested in front of my home too. Yeah, but that's different. So again, we have three branches of government. There's your legislative branch, Senate, Congress. There's your executive branch, the president. There's also, again, the judicial branch, which is your courts. You cannot protest you cannot protest with the intent to alter a court decision. Courts are supposed to look at the evidence. The Supreme Court is supposed to look at the Constitution, and they're not supposed to look at, say, peer pressure, mob rule, essentially. They would try to alter their determinations based on the constitutional rights, or based on the just facts presented to them. If you're threatening the courts, if you're threatening justice, that is trying to use essentially mob violence to have, well, frankly, things that are unjust. It means you're not going by evidence. It means you're not going by the Constitution, and instead you're going by threats of violence, threats of force, being done with the intent of changing the outcome. That's not legal. For some reason, the Biden administration is allowing this to happen, even though it is illegal. And again, this is different than protesting in front of Congress or something like that. Technically, that type of protest is allowed in the United States. And so again, another issue of double standards with this. But let's go a bit deeper into this. Now, activists are also firebombing pro-life pregnancy centers. We've had 4 of these so far. I'll show you a picture of this. So not only did you have an individual arrested with the intent to murder Brett Kavanaugh, Supreme Court Justice, not only have you had these groups post the home addresses of these justices, not only have you had them post the daily schedules, locations they will be at, but even the locations of their children, with the intent, again, of using intimidation for the purpose of trying to alter the decision on Roe versus Wade. But you've had the government turn a blind eye to it. Again, actual violations of the law being allowed on this. Now, the Supreme Court is suggesting they're not going to let this change their decision. In their early opinions, they suggested they do have the intent to overturn Roe versus Wade. Politico leaked it publicly, also technically a crime. But they're not going to go after them either. Which going after journalists, I'd say, is mixed. As a journalist, I tend to be against that. But again, if it's done with the intent of trying to alter the law or cause violence, I'd say it's another issue. On this, though, let's go into it, right? Now, let's go on this a bit more, right? So the narrative, what they're saying is essentially violent extremists and domestic terrorists are on one side, right? The other side is peaceful protesters. So what you have right now, I think, is the dual imagery. Interesting timing on this, but you have dual imagery being shown to you. On one side, you have the January 6th committee hearings, the committee to investigate the January 6th protests, where you had many peaceful protesters arrested on things like trespassing, arrested on things like picketing, in other words, protesting, things that are constitutionally protected in the United States. Video evidence of people having been waved into the Capitol building, police holding the doors open, police escorting people in, things like this, being charged not only with criminal trespassing and some really minor misdemeanor things, but even being charged with disrupting an official proceeding, a law that was, again, invented to go after Enron with the intent of making sure that corporations don't destroy evidence for courts, somehow reinterpreted to mean that if you interrupt, again, like a government activity, if you interrupt a government activity using constitutionally protected protests, that you deserve to be thrown in prison for 20 years. On one side, that is being called extremism, domestic terrorism, insurrection, coup, all those things, even though people were unarmed and had no intent of doing any of that based on evidence we've seen. Whereas on the other side, where people are using threats of violence, people are going to homes with the intent to kill, you do have people firebombing locations, you have people actually disrupting an official proceeding in ways that are illegal, actually on the court side. And this is being totally allowed. This is, again, the peaceful protester side, as the media would frame it. Which I think the optics of this don't really work out that well for the Democrats, personally. I think the timing of this is very bad, especially if this determination, Roe versus Wade, does result in riots, which it very likely will, as the January 6th committee is holding its public hearings where they're trying to suggest that people rioting deserve to be thrown in prison for 20 years or maybe charged with an intent to try to overthrow the United States government. Insurrection or coup, as they're even calling it. The optics of this won't work out well for them at all. Now, one of you is saying that, basically it's a ruling on Dobbs versus Jackson, which could overturn Roe versus Wade. So, yeah, it's some technicalities in this. The main focus is Roe v. Wade, which is the main Supreme Court level decision, which has allowed abortion nationally. It doesn't mean it's going to get rid of it locally. Again, on this, the main issue the Supreme Court has is that the Supreme Court, as many people have noted previously, never really had the authority to make that type of determination. So they're really handing it to the states, and states can say more or less laws on abortion depending on what they want. It's not really getting rid of it, technically. Now, on this note, Democrat Senator Chris Coons is supporting ignoring federal laws regarding protests outside the court justices' homes. Let me show you this video where he's actually talking about this.
Should the Attorney General say, yes, arrest those people before something happens?
Well, Brad, I think if the leaked version of the opinion is matched by what would be a remarkable act of judicial activism, conservative judicial activism, there will be understandable anger across the nation. As an elected official, I've certainly had protests out front of my house. Many of us have who serve in Congress or in other elected offices. But we need to make sure that all appropriate actions are being taken to ensure the safety of members of our federal judiciary, including Supreme Court justice.
Okay. Now, on that, again, it is legal to protest in front of the homes of members of Congress. That is legally protected protest. Because again, you're not trying to use any kind of threats or anything like that or intimidation to overturn a court decision. In court of law, you're supposed to look at the evidence and based on the evidence decide whether a person is innocent or guilty or decide whether something is legal or illegal. Threats, brute force, things like that gets to the realm of mob violence. And that is not something allowed. So he's really pairing two things that have nothing to do with each other, suggesting also that, again, what is legal on one side and illegal on the other side, trying to compare the two, and then suggesting that they care about the safety of these Supreme Court justices, as Democrats themselves actually blocked a law that would offer more protection to the justices, as, again, there was a man with the stated intent to assassinate one of the Supreme Court justices happen. And so, they're downplaying the illegality of all of this while trying to create, similarities where there's not a legal similarity. This is really misrepresenting the law on this case. On this note as well, so this is another story, Epic Times, citing GOP opposition to gun control, AOC Cortez is taking credit for blocking the Supreme Court security bill personally. And again, folks, these are people who are ideologically aligned, who are allowing violations of the law openly, who are not criticizing violations of the law on one side, while trying to claim the other side is insurrectionists and terrorists for holding peaceful protests, while people making death threats, intimidating children and so on, doing things that actually do violate the law, are somehow innocent and don't even warrant additional protections. Now, on this, AOC Cortez also, Chuck Schumer sided with her as well on blocking the bill that would protect these justices. Now, they're saying this is what they're saying on the surface, they want to wait, right, which is ironic. They want to wait because they want additional protections for the Supreme Court justices that provide protection for their staffers and stuff like that. Maybe it'll take another, few weeks or months. The issue is that the main issue of contention is right now, between yesterday and tomorrow, where the Supreme Court may make this determination that could overturn Roe v. Wade, and also their coming decision on gun rights, which could be within the next week. In other words, the time where these justices are going to be most in danger is this week and next week, and Democrats just delayed the protections that would have been given to the Supreme Court justices for that.